I'm Paul Fitzgerald and I'm from the Peterloo Memorial Campaign. The simplest way to describe Peterloo is it was Manchester's Tiananmen Square. Basically the spot where we are now is where a crowd of 60,000 pro-democracy reformers, campaigners gathered from communities all around the region. One of the reasons I've been researching Peterloo so heavily is I'm working on a graphic novel, Peterloo Witnesses to a Massacre, which is just based entirely and drawn entirely from eyewitness accounts. There's no actual fictional words in it. I think sometimes people think that what happened on the 16th of August 1819 happened in isolation. It didn't. It was one of many, many meetings, including meetings here at the same location, of thousands and thousands of people. You're talking about an era of massive, tense social unrest, including things like the Luddites. There are some reasons that the authorities had the right to be nervous. I don't think they had the right to deny people the vote. They certainly didn't have the right to attack people, but it wasn't for no reason that they were edgy. The economic system that benefited them was going to change if ordinary people had the vote. The key speaker was going to be Henry Hunt, who was famous throughout the country, Henry Orator Hunt, as a pro-democracy activist. Henry Hunt was a really, really interesting character. Like all political movements, there's always one person who becomes the focus of it. But undoubtedly, Hunt drew enormous crowds and was recognized by the working class as somebody who was going to bring about change for them. St. Peter's Field, where it happened, wasn't in the city centre. It was on the edge of Manchester before you went into the grasslands of Hume. And everybody knew each other, like you were in conflict with people you knew wielding sabres who hated you, hated your politics, hated everything you stood for. People were marching in a very sort of ordered way that the authorities misinterpreted as military drilling, because they wanted to show they weren't a mob. Most of the women dressed in white, which was a really interesting thing to try and symbolize the purity of their cause. So yeah, a huge crowd slowly gathers here, people packed really close together. The magistrates of the city are watching from a window over there, getting increasingly nervous, absolutely convinced that some huge rebellion is in the offing. They've got a spies network across the whole of the city, so on and so forth. They see this enormous crowd and basically panic. When the key speaker, Henry Hunt, arrives in a carriage, they send in the police, basically the constables, to arrest him. The constables say, this isn't going to happen, we need military backup to do it. It's a private army called the Yeomanry, who consist of the rich citizens of the city, who are just adamantly opposed to what's happening. They're the ones who get summoned first. They're the ones with a grudge. They're the ones out to get the people in the audience. They're angry. There's rumours that they were drunk. They arrive, they arrest Henry Hunt and take the other speakers off the platform, and then they go nuts. They start attacking the banners with their sabres. They're particularly enraged because people are displaying what's called the Liberty Cap, the symbol that people are familiar with from the French and American revolutions. That to them is just an absolute outrage that they've done this. They start slashing at people. You can imagine there's just a massive panic of people fleeing. They're targeting individuals they know. You hear them yelling out, "There's Saxton, get him." Yeah? They've got a grudge. The magistrate's still watching for the window. There's this massive cloud of dust. It's a hot, sunny, dry day. Massive cloud of dust. They can't tell what's going on. They see this tumult. They assume that it's the crowd attacking the yeomanry. And then they send in the regular army who charge to clear the field. And you can imagine then that is absolute mayhem. People fleeing a sabre charge. They're going to fall over each other. They're going to stampede on each other. Loads and loads of people get injured. People are falling into cellars. Somebody got his leg pierced by the railings of a cellar. Absolute chaos. So very, very little of Peterloo still exists. Very little of the architecture. This is one of the few surviving pieces of architecture from the period. It's the wall of the Friends Meeting House. And it's hard to imagine, but people were trying to climb over this thing to get away from the attack. A huge wave of people compressed against it. People lifting each other over it, much like Hillsborough. And just how relentless the attack was is emphasised by the fact that they were pursued into the courtyard by the military. Peterloo was a disaster. You know, if you had a sabre cut to your shoulder, there was no way you were going to work. It was going to fester for months. It was a disaster for individuals, but it was also a disaster for the democracy movement. It's insulting to the memory of the people who died at Peterloo to say nothing's changed. I think that's unfair. You know, people do have the vote. But what we have to ask is questions about, does our vote work? Does it matter? Is it significant? Or are there still enormous economic and financial influences that thwart democracy? Does it still have enemies? I think it does, yeah. So we need to protect it, we need to deepen it, and we need to spread it. And I think that's the real message of Peterloo. If you remember it simply as a point of historical interest, I don't think you're carrying on the legacy of those who arrived here. The people who arrived here and walked past cannons. You know, like there was 2 cannons stationed over there ready for them. They walked past them and gathered anyway. I think the only way to honour their memory is to ask those really profound questions.